Today I'm going to teach us about how to make some simple shapes and how to deal with objects that are symmetrical when we're drawing. So in Procreate, we're going to open and we can have just a new file if we want to, or we can work on the same file that we have been. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to start with a blank one, so I'll clear this out. And in a new layer, I'm going to title this Simple Shapes. So make sure that that's the name. And I'm going to show you the various ways that we can approach that. So Procreate has some good tools to help us create shapes that are pretty easy. So the first thing that it does is it can smooth out our lines for us. So I want you to experiment with trying your best to draw just a straight line. This is a quick attempt. You can see that it's not perfectly even though. So if I hold a line down, without letting go, it'll create this line for me. So now I have one that I can stretch and move around, and it's pretty straight. So at the top it says a line is created. If I let go of that, I can also edit that shape, and it'll bring out these little blue dots that'll again let me kind of manipulate that. Once I'm done and I hit on anything else, it'll get rid of it though, so do be careful with that. If I hit undo, it will stop my line from being completely perfect, so you have to be careful with that. But if I redo it, it'll show up again. I just can't edit it like I did before. So that's one way to create some good shapes, is just by having those straight lines. So I'm going to start out with trying to make a circle. So this is my best attempt at drawing a circle. Again, if I draw it kind of slowly, go all the way around, Procreate will do its best to make a circle for me. Right now this isn't perfect, so if I twist this around, you can see it's not even on all of the sides. But if I tap down a finger, which you can't see me do, but if I tap down a finger, you can see that now it's even. So even if I rotate it, it's even on all sides. So if I untap my finger, which has been holding this whole time, so if I let go of it, you can see it's no longer perfect. If I hold down, it will do that for me. So there is a perfect circle and how to make it. You can edit that shape if that bar appears for you. You can turn it into an ellipse instead, so it'll be able to be squished, but if you just tap back, it'll turn it back into that original circle. So make sure that when you're drawing a circle, it thinks you are. So if I draw something that looks a little bit more like an oval, that in no way looks like it was even an attempt at a circle. So even if I tap down at it, like sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. For this one, it thought like, okay, maybe you wanted it to be a circle, but if I make like an even skinnier one, then it won't work even if I tap it down. So be careful, there's like a threshold between what's circle enough and what's not quite circle enough. Okay, so now that I have that, I can kind of twist it if I want to and move it around. So that like edit shape up at the top is a good way to help you if you want to make some quick adjustments to it. But again, it disappears as soon as you finish. So those were some circles and ellipses, some oval shapes for you. Next, we're going to do the same thing with a square. So I can just draw like a bunch of, lines to create my square, or I can, again, attempt to draw one. And, oops, I didn't even let go in time. This is my attempt at a square. If I slowly try and draw one, and without letting go, I hold down at the end, it'll smooth out my lines for me, but you can see that it's not quite even. So if I tap down with my finger, it'll even that out for me. So if I untap, so let go versus tapping, those are its corrections. So just smoothing out the lines versus trying to make a square. Again, if I draw something that looks a little bit more like a rectangle, it might let me make it into a square, but usually it doesn't. So this one, it doesn't think that I'm trying to make a square. It'll smooth out lines for me, but it's not turning it into a square at all. So those are some of the things that you can do. This will sort of work with any other shapes, so like triangles or even just shapes with just straight lines in them. If I hold down, it'll smooth them out for me. But if I tap down my finger, it like has no idea what I'm trying to do, so it just kind of keeps it. with these polygons. As long as it has a bunch of straight lines, it'll work out for you. You have to be careful when you're doing organic ones though. So these are very sharp and these are polygons. So it has all these edges and corners. If I try to do it with something organic, it'll not really understand what I'm doing and it'll probably just turn into a line. So this is me trying to draw something that looks like a flower. If I hold it down, it'll turn it into a polygon instead. So this really doesn't work for curves. If you do like one curve at a time, so if I try to create like one flower petal at a time, it'll smooth out the curves for you though. So that is one way kind of around that. Not perfect, but holding that down does sort of work. It just kind of thinks of them as like mini ovals that haven't been completed. All right, so there you have your shapes. We can also fill in the shapes if we want to and keep them from just being outlined. So I can drag and drop some color into here. I can also pick a different color and fill in the middle of it. Notice that if I fill in a color, it keeps the outline and the, what's it called, is still black. So the inside is the only thing that's blue. I can try really hard to like aim it at the outline and that might change it a little bit, but that doesn't always work. So we'll deal with how to change that color really quickly. So I don't want to have to redo all of this. So instead, if I want to change the outline color as well, one of my options is I can go into my simple shapes and I can click on it and you see that the sidebar opens up. Under rename, select, copy, fill, layer, clear, there's something called alpha lock. So if I hit on alpha lock, you can kind of see that the background turns into this checker shape. That means the background is like locked essentially. So if I try to draw on here now, so I'll pick a red color. If I try to draw on here, I can draw inside of things, but not where it's blank. So it only fills in things that have already been filled out. You can see that kind of happening in the square. So if I want to take my circle and make it just a pure blue one, I'll pick that color that I had before. So I can pick in here, I had that color in my history. And I can go around and color that instead. Picking colors, you can do up here. Let's say that I just lost that color and it wasn't anywhere. I like made a special one. And like for some reason it didn't show up. You can also pick colors that are already on your picture by holding down. So if I hold down long enough with one finger, you see this bar or this circle appear, and that is another way to pick colors that I've already used. So if I hold that down, I have that blue color. You can see that that's the one selected now, and once again I'll just fill that in. So now I have a filled in one. Now that alpha lock is on, I can't really fill in anything else. If I try to color the inside of my square, notice it only lets me color the outline because I hadn't filled it in before. So in order to go back and change that, I will go here, click on it, and unclick on alpha lock. Now I can do whatever I want to and I can draw wherever I want and it should be fine. Okay. So that is how to create some simple shapes using the regular brush and drawing them. Another way to create simple shapes is up at the select tool. One of my issues with drawing shapes, if you notice, is sometimes I get kind of round corners instead of super sharp ones. So I don't want my rectangles to have round corners. I can make my brush really small, or I can go into my select tool and instead pick on the rectangle tool. Notice how it says add. So I can draw in a rectangle instead. And I can drop a color in there or hit at the bottom next to save and load. There's color fill, so I can click on that. And now I have a rectangle with really sharp corners versus this one over here who has really round corners. So using the select tool will give me more options for sharper shapes. So I like to use that. The ellipse will again make circles for you, so I can make a circle, I can make an oval. It only lets me do them that way, so it doesn't let me twist them around, so that's kind of limited. But I also like the freehand option. So if I hit on the freehand option, and remember how I said it won't really smooth out organic things for you, so you have to be careful. With the freehand option, I can make some really pretty shapes that are sharp and round and fill those in. So use the freehand tool to create some other shapes for you and see if that works a little bit better. So that is how to create shapes either using your brush or using the select tool to do that. Next, we're going to deal with symmetry. So I'm going to unclick on that to make it invisible, and I'm going to rename this layer Symmetry. And we're going to try to draw something symmetrical, which is the same on both sides. So if I go in here and I try to draw something like a butterfly, let's say this is my poor attempt at drawing a butterfly. So you can see it's not very even, it's not the same on both sides, but Procreate has a tool that will let us make some things that are symmetrical. So I'm going to clear this out and try that again using some guides. At the top next to gallery, we can hit on our actions tool, and we have add. Next to that is canvas. We're going to use a drawing guide to help us. So you can see a little line appeared there, and it also lets me edit my drawing guide. So you're going to click on this to check it and turn it on, and hit on edit drawing guide. A couple of settings will turn on. There's 2D grid, isometric perspective. We're going to hit on symmetry. At the bottom, there's a line down the middle that's going to tell us where it's going to be symmetrical. I can make that line really opaque, or I can make it really translucent, depending on how well I want to see it. I can change how thick or how thin it is. It's not too much range, but it's there. And depending on what color your project is, maybe if your project is very blue, you want a different color for your line so you can see the guideline very easily. So I'll change it to pink for no particular reason. Out of options, right now it's vertical, which is fine. You can also make horizontal symmetry, quadrant symmetry, and radial, which we've talked about before. For us, we're going to be using vertical. The last setting you can change is where is it symmetrical. So right now it's down the center. If I click on the blue line, I can move where that symmetry line is going to be. I can also click on the green dot at the top, and I can move the angle of it. It's really hard to reset that though on your own. So if you click on the blue dot, you can just reset it and it'll go back to the presets. So my drawing guide is set to symmetry. It's a color that I like, and I have reset it just to make sure that it's right down in the middle. I'm going to hit done, and you can see that line is now on my canvas. So to check that a layer is symmetrical based on those drawing guides, you can see in my layers, my symmetry layer now says assisted on it. So if I click on it, you can see drawing assist is turned on. It has a little check mark next to it. So now when I draw, you see it appear on both sides, perfectly symmetrical. So just check your settings and make sure that it's on that layer. Even if it says like the drawing guide is on in your actions, it needs to be set to that layer as well. So click here and on drawing assist. So now you can see that my butterfly attempt is on both sides. If I undo, it undoes on both sides. If I redo, it'll put it on both sides as well. So again, I draw anything I want to, and it should appear on both sides. This works with your brush tool and it works with your eraser. So if I want to correct something and erase it, it'll erase on both sides as well. Now that I have that, I can fill that in with some color. Again, anything I color on one side is going to be done the same on the other. So here's some random blue patterns. If I try to fill in, it will fill in the same on both sides as well. Okay, so now I have a symmetrical drawing. If I move it, it will no longer be symmetrical. So if I take my transform tool, I can move it all I want to. It just won't be in the center. But I have my nice little guideline to help me bring it back to the center. One of the other things that kind of helps with making sure things are centered is you can see these lines are popping up all over my drawing to kind of help me and guide me. That's because at the bottom of the transform tool, I've turned on what's called snapping, and you can set on magnetics and snapping together, and those will help you pick certain areas. So if I want this to be centered in the exact middle, it shows me with these yellow lines like it's centered vertically and horizontally. I can move things around and it'll tell me how they've angled compared to the actual canvas. So now I've centered something, it is symmetrical. I can turn the symmetry off if I want to now, and now that that's off, I can add drawings to it, and you see that it's not showing up on both sides. But I would like everything on that list to be assisted, or on that layer. Other layers will not have that on unless you turn on the drawing assist. So if you want on a different layer some more symmetrical things, then you can turn that on and it'll be there for you. So now you know how to make simple shapes and use the Symmetry tool. To turn off the Symmetry tool, if you don't want to see that line appearing there anymore, you can turn your drawing guide off and it won't distract you anymore.